and that is why you never take a hippie to a second location. Here we go. So,
What?
come on, you never heard that expression?
Yeah, I guess.
Never take a hippie to a second location. 30 Rock. It's a 30 Rock. That's a 30 Rock joke.
Ah, okay.
Sorry. It's definitely a 30 Rock joke, but it's
I'm
awesome.
still catching up to 30 Rock on Netflix.
Josh, you're at Josh Cooper. Well, Josh Cooper's with us, guys. By the way, this is our little pre-show time. Coop, you're at, one of the things I like talking about you talking with you about. You are very much a cultural guy. Are you a 30 Rock guy?
No, actually, 30 Rock and I guess The Office were two shows. I think that was back when I was in my non-TV watching days. So then I realized the joy of just being able to sit around and watch sitcoms, and I don't think I had DVR back then. So
Yeah.
actually, no, that was a dark time in my life when I was catching up on reruns of Sports Night on DVD.
Sports Night's an amazing show. No, come on.
Yeah, I mean that, and just honestly watching footballs on Saturdays, and then pretty much doing nothing else besides that. So.
I think that's the only Aaron Sorkin show that I didn't really get into.
Really?
I watched Studio 60 from the Sunset Strip before, and I like that more than I liked Sports Night, which is strange, but.
Oh no, you gotta get it somehow.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's out there. Maybe I just have to watch it over again. I think I just went in and out on that, but I was a big West Wing fan, so that was some of the best TV out there.
Well, West Wing was amazing. So if you like West Wing and Newsroom, I love Newsroom. Newsroom is coming back for one last season, right?
Yeah, last season.
When does it start? I mean, my wife keeps asking me, when's Newsroom starting? Isn't it?
I think it's October or November. I think so, because it's I'll find out.
Perfect time when you're in hockey.
Yeah, exactly. Just throw it. All summer long, I've been doing nothing but watching. What we were catching up on. What we got into was really kind of funny. This is kind of a funny thing to admit on this show as a human man, but I think the
as opposed to an android.
No, it's Masters of Sex. Unbelievably awesome show.
Yes.
And have you ever watched it? I mean,
Yes.
it's just it's on Showtime, and it's about Masters and Johnson and sex studies in the 1950s. And it is this season though. Have you been watching this season, Mike? Too?
Yeah, off and on. I mean, I catch it.
This season is so well written, it's crazy. I mean, it's just usually the second season of a show that was kind of good. I kind of had doubts because they did so much stuff in the first season, but this season, oh my gosh! It's just written unbelievably well. I mean, there are some incredible turns. It's not salacious, so sorry about that if you salaciousness. It's more just really just about what they're going through, and it's just incredibly well written. Oh my gosh, episodes.
Yeah, the Newsroom is starting November the 9th, and Showtime has really stepped up because they used to. I mean, HBO used to dominate Sunday nights with their shows, and I still think like Game of Thrones, even though you're not in. I know you're not into it, but Game of Thrones is pretty great. Boardwalk Empire was last night. Newsroom is coming back, but like Masters of Sex and Ray Donovan with Liev Schreiber is phenomenal.
I haven't seen that one yet.
You should watch season 1 and then try to catch up. It's really, really good. A little gritty, but really good.
I just say I was praying you weren't going to say Homeland because I feel like that show is just completely dropped off the face of the map.
Well, it dropped off the face of the map because the main character. So it's not a spoiler now because I'm sorry because it's been 4 or 5 months since it happened. The main character was killed off. So
yeah,
I mean, I'd be surprised if it lasts another year.
The best part is they got rid of his daughter because people were complaining that she was too much of a diva.
Really?
The SNL takedown of Homeland pretty much destroys the entire show.
Right.
I can't watch it anymore because of it.
No, I'm with you. I watched the first season. I mean, my wife and I are not into intense things, so as far as like TV goes, we don't want any stress in our lives beyond our regular lives. So like anything that was just too much for us. And as is Game of Thrones, I think that we both said that one day when we're retired and off, we'll have all the DVDs and we'll just have a bed in for 3 weeks and watch everything like Lost. We never saw an episode of Lost.
Oh my God!
I've never seen an episode of Breaking Bad.
Wow.
Okay, so there's certain things like that. I know, it's pretty crazy, but
You gotta get on that.
I'm happy about that because it's nice to have those things in your back pocket as you move on in life.
I religiously watched Lost every week. That was appointment television for me.
Anyone watching the season premiere of Sons of Anarchy tomorrow?
No.
The last season.
I never got into it. I know it's a good show, Josh, but I never got into it.
Great show.
Yeah.
Well, Coop likes The Bachelor.
Yes.
That.
Bachelor in Paradise is on tonight. So if the Giants are getting blown out, then I can at least switch to that, and I'll be all good.
Coop, I
watch it too.
I have a friend who's into that show, and I have like the entire cable on demand thing, and my friend missed like a couple episodes, and I was forced to watch like 2 episodes of Bachelor in Paradise. I can only imagine that they use that as torture material at Guantanamo.
Oh.
Bad.
It's so bad. The episode. You clearly didn't see the episode where Markel went out on 3 dates because that was probably one of the greatest I've ever seen. No, I mean, in terms of the Bachelor series, I really, because I didn't get into it until I started dating my now wife, and I really want to go back and try to find the Jesse Palmer season because I can only fathom how hilarious it must be.
It was good. Actually, I was friends with 2 of the girls, 2 of the who were bachelorettes on the show, not on Jesse's season, but he was good. But that's the reason why I started getting into it. One of them being Jesse Salinas, who now married a former NHLer, Jordan Henry. She's a friend. And then what's her name? Oh man, I'm losing my mind now. She passed away actually. She not to put a downer on it again.
That's the way we usually start.
That usually
not to bring things down, but somebody died. Okay. Good.
Josh Rimmer is one of the more
macabre,
very intriguing extra life. I mean, just the people that you've run into. But anyway, we'll talk about that more at another time. All right, so
Monday.
Yeah.
I'll move on.
So here we go. I'm very good. Let's go live here.
You gotta love when you get an email that says buy 2 pairs of jeans and get a free movie. Anyway,
not even worth mentioning.
It's the 8th, right? Yeah.
It's the 8th.
Wednesday's my wife's birthday. I should know it's the 8th. All right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It is Wednesday, September 8th, 2014.
It's Monday. I'm Michael Lagello.
Hey, hold on. Wait, stop. Let's do this again.
Oh my God.
I suck, man.
Yeah.
The funny thing about enough people make fun of me in life to know this already that I'm so easily made fun of in real life.
I should have just been stoic and gone forward.
You should have. You should have just stayed with it, and then people would be like, "What? It's Wednesday." Hey, Hockey World! It's Monday, September 8th, 2014.
I'm Michael Lagello.
I'm Josh Rimmer.
And I'm Eklund, and you're watching the HockeybuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. And today, we have a special guest who'll be joining us from time to time in the upcoming season, Mr. Josh Cooper from Nashville. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. Now, you're actually technically not from Nashville. You're a New York kid, right?
Yeah. Born and raised downtown Manhattan.
Oh, really? In Manhattan? Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Going to Ranger games as a kid. My dad took me countless ones. Never any Islanders or Devils games, though. So, sorry, Islanders and Devils fans. But
Coop, it's very interesting because I was down in Manhattan for the first time in my entire life 2 weeks ago, and I can just imagine, how strange it would be. I mean, it's your home, but I'm saying how strange it would be to grow up down there. It's like another world, really.
Well, it was to some degree, but at the same token, it was very similar to probably what everyone else experienced, which is, hey, your parents out of town? Yeah, okay, cool, let's throw a party this weekend. Except we just didn't go to the mall on weekends. We, went to, I guess, Rangers games or Mets games or, I guess, the Met. I don't know. Or,
what's funny about it is, New York to me does feel like a giant one big house. Like when you see people walking in the street, I get this feeling like you're just passing them in the hallway versus the street. Like it feels like there's this whole thing of everybody lives here, we're all okay with each other, Some people don't even care what they look like when they go out for something because it's just like, they'll just throw on maybe they throw on a robe and some pants. And they're just out about, and a guy was up just, we went up to see the Colbert Report. I'm actually going to see the Jon Stewart show next.
Oh, nice.
But, yeah, so it's fun. I mean, I love Manhattan. I loved covering the Stanley Cup Finals in New York were awesome. Absolutely awesome. So, so we have some news already that's just breaking out right now, guys, that we, Rafael Diaz, not related to Cameron Diaz in any way, shape, or form, who has actually accepted a training camp tryout offer with the Calgary Flames. And we had talked a little bit about Diaz before because Diaz is really one of these guys who we had, was still one of the better players that was out there. I wrote about him in my better players that was out there type blog. And so he turned down the Red Wings. And it's kind of, and it is interesting. Someone in the chat room said too, it's interesting how many right-handed defensemen, are not, which is what the Red Wings want so desperately. They can't get to go there. But you've what are your thoughts on Diaz, Cooper? I mean, he's a pretty good player to be out still, don't you think?
I mean, to be out still, yeah. And I mean, obviously a good move by the Flames being able to get him to come in. And, right-handed shooting defenseman. I mean, the Preds had way too many of those this past year. So, I mean, you talked about Detroit. I mean, I think, if they were interested in him in some way, shape, or form, I think kind of an issue would just sort of be in the sense of why are people not wanting to go there anymore? So, I mean, one of the better players still left out there, and really, just as you said, just a tryout situation. I mean, it cost the Flames absolutely nothing really to have him come on in and see if he can provide some depth for them on the blue line.
Speaking of tryouts too, Ryan Malone is not officially trying out yet with the Rangers, but is skating with the Rangers players, and his agent is saying, stay tuned. I think this is a typical thing where you get a guy who really still wants to sign a contract and is going to wait to do the camp tryout thing till the very, very end. It reminds me of Bill Guerin a few years back. And I just think that, we also heard rumors of Ryan Malone returning to Pittsburgh. I know for a fact that that's where Ryan Malone wants to go, and there were times when Ryan Malone was on the trade market years back when he was with Tampa, where the only place he would accept a trade to was Pittsburgh. But now, so I think that, it's possible that we could still see him go to Pittsburgh. But, showing up at a Rangers camp is a big deal. Of course, Alexei Kovalev is also there.
Is his dad still with the Penguins?
Working with the Penguins?
Ryan Malone? Yes, he was in the
Greg Malone.
Greg Malone.
I think, but I don't know where he is now.
Huh.
Yeah, I know he was with them for a long time. I don't think he's with them anymore, but he really liked his time there, and he would love to go back there. And he was a very, very popular player in that locker room too. Which right now, in my opinion, losing Orpik, who's not a great signing necessarily for the Caps, but is still a big locker room presence. I thought that bringing back Ryan Malone would actually make some sense for the Penguins.
Well, according to his Wikipedia page, Greg Malone is a scout with Tampa Bay, which is strange. Because Ryan was with Tampa Bay, obviously, until the recent problems. Discussing Diaz.
Yes.
You're right. I mean, Calgary, they signed a journeyman defenseman, Corey Potter, in the last couple days, who played with Edmonton, played with Boston a little bit last year. Diaz was with the Rangers, was with Vancouver last year. I think this is just Treliving and Brian Burke adding some depth. I don't know if they really have any young guys on defense that they really think are ready to play in the NHL right now, so they're just bringing in a couple depth defensemen. And like as you said a number of times, Zach, that him trying out there does not mean that he's going to sign there. So if he plays well and there are other scouts that are keeping their eye on him, and he is a right-hand shot defenseman, which is a rare commodity in this league, then he may be trying out for somebody else, basically.
Yeah.
There's also been speculation out there that Calgary could be trying to move Dennis Wideman. I think that was thrown out there maybe a month or two ago. I don't know if it was even yourself.
I mentioned it too. Yeah, and they've definitely been trying to. They tried to last year as well, but I don't think that
good luck with that.
Yeah. I mean, Weidman's contract is mighty, right? It's very high.
He's big time injury prone too. He has a hard time staying healthy.
That was one of the more asinine contracts that was signed in recent years. He's making $5.25 million, and he's nowhere close to being a $5.25 million defenseman. He does have some offensive ability, but he's basically an offense only defenseman. I've never really been impressed with his career, whether it was in Boston or wherever else, Washington for a time, wherever else he went, he was always sort of a one-dimensional guy.
He's got his fans, though, he's got his fans, like, it's a very polarizing figure, not to make this the Dennis Weidman hour, but he's a very polarizing figure, because he is, like, there are people, I remember he almost got invited to Team Canada's camp last year. Remember that whole thing was going on? You heard talk of that. I mean, that was just kind of crazy, just thinking about that. So there are people who really like him. I mean, but I do agree that when the contract came out, it was definitely the benchmark of, like, I would say kind of like the Keaton contract was this year. Just like, what the heck? This is a guy who's in the right place at the right time, obviously.
Yeah. There are people who like him, Mr. and Mrs. Weidman.
Yes. Well, it's a good name for a defenseman, Weidman. It makes sense.
Yeah. How about this?
Rims?
Oh. He's been in the league for he's played over 12 seasons in the NHL. One season he's actually played 82 games.
Yeah, I mean,
and that was with the Caps, 11-12.
Right, and that's either there are people who tell you, well, that's easy, either injury prone or he's just a tough-nosed guy who's never going to give you, like, what they say about Ryan Kesler. Ryan Kesler, he's not injury prone. He's just the way he plays. He's never going to get more than 45 to 55 games out of him. So, and he is slow, as Flames are pointing out in the locker room.
Well, I mean, the thing, though, he can score, and I mean, the other thing, too, is he's old, and he's not old, but he's getting older to a point where you talk about the injury-prone situation, that just gets worse as a guy gets older. So I think he's, 31 years old now, or close to 31. I mean, and he got that contract in the famous summer, I like to call it the summer of Suter, where pretty much everyone was getting overpaid.
Right. That was the summer of Suter, you're right.
Yeah, and it was just, I mean, it was just too much. So, or maybe it was, I guess, right before, but I mean, it was still an extreme contract. Just because the sense of, you had such a small amount of talent who was available, and I mean, it just feel like guys had to really overpay. But then again, I feel like that's every free agent summer anyway. So
and we are talking a bunch of positive attributes about him. He's old, but he is slow. So
well, let's not forget this too. Like, sometimes if you give, you say, well, we're going to go out and get a top 2 defenseman, and if you pay a 3 or 4 defenseman $5 million, you can suddenly tell your fans, we got our top 2 defenseman because he's getting $5 million. So it is a really bereft of talent. Like, you're right about that. Let's talk, but not lacking talent would be the Nashville Predators, Josh, and we'll go there with my little transition. We had a discussion about the Predators last week that I got kind of adamant about. That I was very ticked off, to say the least, that the Predators are the longest odds to win the Stanley Cup in the NHL. At 75-1, longer than the Buffalo Sabres, the Florida Panthers.
Tied with them, yeah.
Yeah.
That's just, and so anyway, I mean, that obviously a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's Nashville, and they're maybe not as many people betting as there are in Buffalo, but still, this. What are your thoughts on the offseason?
I wouldn't put them at that long odds. I mean, these are the Bovada odds. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, they also had the Hawks ahead of the Kings for Stanley Cup odds, and I saw that and I was just kind of shaking my head. So,
yeah.
I mean, as good as the Blackhawks are, I personally still think the Kings are the best team in the league. But, I look at the Preds. They made a lot of good moves, a lot of good value moves. Are they going to win as currently constructed? I don't think so. But at the same token, I still think they're better than some of these other teams that you mentioned, the Florida Panthers, being one, the Flames, a few other teams. So I mean, I strongly think that they're better positioned than them, and I think that they have some solid players. But I don't see them being a Stanley Cup contender right now. But I feel like give them a couple of years, kind of let some of these younger guys develop. Shea Weber's only 29 years old. He's still in tremendous shape. you mentioned Dennis Wideman not being able to stay healthy. Shea Weber stays incredibly healthy, and I think that they're going to be in a good spot. But right now, they're not at 75-1. I'd put them maybe more 50-1 or something like that. I don't see them as being a threat, but I do see them as being a playoff team. And we all know once you get in the playoffs, hey, anything can happen.
I mean, what's the difference now? And especially when you have like a Pekka Rinne, you have the right components. I actually argued I'm a lot more bullish or bearish, whatever means that I like them more. I always forget on the Preds, because I honestly I like the fact that of all the teams in the West, in my opinion, they sort of match up against the Kings in some ways. Like, they are one team that actually is built sort of the same way the Kings are built. They feel like an old Patrick Division team to me, basically.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, they're a little Patrick Division. Wow, we're going way back in time.
Oh, yeah.
It is. I mean, they're a little small down the middle. I think that's the problem. You look at the Kings. I mean, they have size up front, size down the middle. The problem with the Preds is, Mike Ribeiro is probably going to camp as your number one center, and he's not a small guy per se, but he's not. He's a tall guy. He's not really a thick guy. I mean, you look at Derek Roy. I think he's 5'9", 5'10", or something like that.
Maybe.
5'8", maybe. Who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
Kalle Yarncroke is going to be their third line center potentially. He's 5'10" or something along those lines. I mean, I think their biggest center right now, and Mike Fisher's obviously out with the ruptured Achilles.
Yeah.
Paul Gostad is their fourth line center, maybe their biggest center, and he's 6'4". So
Right.
they're paying him, I think, probably more than their top three lines combined. But top three line centers combined. But
Yeah.
I don't know if they're built like the Kings per se. I think they're strong down the middle, which is good. But I still think that they can't match up with the elites of the Western Conference down the middle from a size and strength perspective, which could be a problem for them this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, you've been through many Barry Trotz camps, and now this is your first Peter Laviolette experience. I've been there with Peter in Philly and saw the first year he came in here, and I know it's very different. What's the impression been for you?
Different attitude, different mindset. Everything just kind of feels, I don't know, more up-tempo. I mean, and I feel like Barry got a very bad rap just in terms of, yeah, he likes to preach two-way type coaching and what you will, and maybe he's slightly more defensive slanted, but overall you deal with the hand you're dealt in terms of talent, and those Paul Kariya teams that you've mentioned to me in the past were very good offensively, and they were ranked in the top 10. I think one year they were ranked 4th, so he knows how to coach offense, but I think Laviolette is much more of an up-tempo coach. I think he's a guy who they brought in basically saying we need more offense, and it's kind of a chicken or the egg type situation of, did Peter Laviolette come in and they got all the guys who were going to bring in more offense, or were they going to do it anyway? So
Yeah.
it's going to be different. It's going to be a different mindset, different mentality, but I think at the end of the day, when you still have the same general manager for 16 years, there is kind of this consistency level that is still going to be there regardless.
See, that's the thing, and before I go to Josh Rimmer has a question for you too, but before I go there, I guess it was just as big a fan as I've been of Barry Trotz in the past, and I have been a really big, and I agree with everything you said about dealing the hand you've dealt, and he's been able to show how he can coach all different kinds of styles because they've had vastly different kinds of teams over the years. But yeah, I think it was just time for the Predators fans, perhaps, to get a new voice, just to get something new. It just seemed like, it was the change for change's sake in some ways. But that being said, to me, the great thing about that organization was the fact that the players were held accountable because they didn't think the coach was going to leave the next day. I've been in Philly here, that the players aren't accountable. The coach could go at any minute. So having seen that from the outside, I mean, was it just the time to do it?
I think so. I think you mentioned, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of what you were saying. I mean, it was a change for change's sake, but it was just time. And at the same token, I do agree with what you said about, I think what gave Barry Trotz such incredible power was him knowing, okay, you're not going to fire me. And once that started to get chipped away at a little bit, I think that, I wouldn't say players tuned him out. I mean, I think that players who play for Barry like Barry generally, but I think that kind of dented his aura, if you will. And I think that they've really been hyping this new offensive system, and I think a lot of that is for selling ticket purposes. But hey, you know what? You got to in this type of market. I mean, as I've say quite often, it's hockey in Nashville, Tennessee, and 30 years ago, who'd have ever thought that was possible? So, I think that it was a change that had to be made. I think that they got the best possible coach they could have gotten who was on the market for this type of situation, and it could work out really well for them. It may not. We don't know, but I think at least they showed their fan base they were trying to move in some sort of different direction.
Yeah, good, Rims.
Yeah, I just want to ask about Pekka Rinne. Obviously, he missed a good chunk of time last year with the injury. Is he 100% coming into camp?
I believe he is. He played in the World Championships for Finland, played really well for them, and I think that he is. I think the biggest question there going into camp is just simply the Mitch Korn factor, in that he was the longtime goalie coach, really has sort of coaxed a lot of talent out of Rinne, Carter Hutton. Hutton even joked to me the other day. He says, "Well, I was a goalie before Mitch was here." So, I think that's sort of the question: is how does the team, or I guess how do the goaltenders respond to not having the goaltending coach there? I think Pekka's 100%. I think he's still going to have to manage this issue as a human being probably for the rest of his life, not even just a hockey player. But obviously had the the hip surgery last summer and then the hip infection. But from my understanding that he is 100%, but he's also going to be 32 on November 3rd. So, I mean, granted, goalies seem to be able to stay in their prime longer than some other players, but, coming off of 2 major surgeries like that, you have to wonder, and rightfully so, Josh, as you asked, how is he going to be? Is he going to be 100%? I mean, they say he is, but is that actually going to be the case? Is that the case? We'll find out when they start playing.
Do you think the backup is? I mean, I like the backup a lot, but I think you have to. If you're Nashville, you really have to count on the backup to play more than you have in the past if you want to get a couple more years out of Pekka.
Carter Hutton won 20 games last year. Mm-hmm. Solid goaltender, explosive, confident guy. Isn't somebody who's shy about his abilities, but again, that's the Mitch Korn factor.
Yeah.
Korn helped Carter Hutton more than Carter Hutton helped Carter Hutton. I mean,
right.
I just said that really fast. But still, you have to wonder about that, and Carter can kind of joke around about stuff like that, and rightfully so. He should have an ego. He's an NHL goaltender, but how much did Mitch help him and move him in that direction? I think we're going to find out this year.
Yeah, and we're also in Washington, where Mitch went. I think is going to be fun to watch that too, because there's a team that's needed. I mean, if there's ever a team that's needed a guy like him to come in, it's not surprising that Barry pushed for that so hard to make that happen.
I hope Braden Holtby likes white pucks and weird, I guess wooden boards and.
I love the white puck thing. That's amazing. I mean, that to me is one of the coolest. I love that kind of stuff. I mean, it's like right out of it's a mixture of Rocky and Mighty Ducks 2 to me.
Well, and Star Wars as well.
Yeah, right. Star Wars too.
Because also Mitch is pretty short. He's got the Yoda thing going pretty well.
Yes, he does. That's so funny. Rimmer?
I have another question. James Neal obviously traded at the draft to Nashville. This player, in my opinion, had a huge upside and could be a 90-point forward. What expectations are there on James Neal this year, and can he be at least a 70-point forward in Nashville?
Josh, I didn't. When they first made the trade, it was kind of like, okay, cool. They got this guy who can shoot the puck really hard and has an amazing one-timer. Who's going to pass him the puck? And so you're sitting there and you're wondering how it's going to work out. And then they end up getting Mike Ribeiro. And I think Mike Ribeiro could be tremendous for James Neal, just because Ribeiro is a little bit older. I think he's 34, 35, something along those lines. But he can pass the puck really well, as good as anyone in the league can. And I think that he and James Neal can really, if they can gel and bond early on, I think it could be a really solid, almost even a legitimate first line. I mean, Steve Sullivan, I interviewed him, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, and he said Predators fans are going to see somebody who can score unlike they've ever seen before. And talking to Carter Hutton yesterday, I guess it was last week in practice, it's not just Neal's one-timer that's good. I mean, you guys see him way more in the Eastern Conference than I did out in the West. I guess maybe a little bit when he was with Dallas, but obviously he's been where he's taken off. he can change sort of angles on his stick blades where he can disguise the puck when he shoots it. And that was what Hutton said was the hardest thing with him, was not so much stopping the one-timer, which is obviously, probably the second best in the league, maybe behind Stamkos, but just the way he's able to, you think he's going, say top left, and he ends up going top right, and you're just kind of like, how did that happen? That to Hutton was the hardest thing in terms of dealing with James Neal.
Well, James Neal, the thing the Penguins are going to miss the most about him and Jussi Jokinen, who they lost, they were the two players on the Penguins that drove the net. They went to the net. The Penguins are very, easy to defend against in some ways. I mean, goalies will tell you they don't nearly get, knocked over as much as they do against other teams in the Metro Division. But, when you have, Jussi Jokinen and James Neal, they would go to the net. And James Neal was at his best when he was driving the net. Like, that's definitely something, Laviolette loves players that drive the net. So that's going to play right into it. Mike, you have a question?
Yeah, Josh, the Preds have long been known for their strength on defense. Obviously, Weber, but Josi and Seth Jones are two younger guys who, appear to have really, prominent and promising futures. Ryan Ellis has been somebody who's been slow to develop, stayed in the AHL longer than I expected him to. Sort of had a breakout year last year, 6 goals, 21 assists. He's a restricted free agent. There's still a number of guys who are RFAs right now who are not signed. What is the expectation? How far are the two sides apart in terms of getting a deal done?
I think as of today, they're quite far. Just kind of judging from the chatter that I'm hearing. I think that's a situation that's going to get worked out before camp. I mean, all you just need is one phone call. One side needs to move a few inches closer to the other, and then a deal can get done. But I think that the two sort of comparables that have been kind of thrown out there to me on Ellis are Tyson Barrie and Eric Goodbranson, the deals that they got. Similar age, similar draft type situation. I guess Barrie was a third-round pick, but he's more of an offensive type guy. That's still a decent chunk of change for the Preds. I guess to give a guy $2.5 million who's only played one full NHL season and didn't really. I guess 27 points is decent. He's still mostly a power play specialist for them. Yeah. I think a deal gets done. I don't think Ellis holds out. In the past, it's funny you mentioned Ellis staying in the minors for a long time. I've always said that, considering his offensive prowess in junior, he was probably their most valuable trading chip. To go out and get someone, because I always thought that his value would never be higher than it was when he was scoring 100 points in junior. Right. They liked him enough to hold on to him, thinking that maybe one of our guys leaves and he's going to end up kind of being a bigger name, second pairing or first pairing defenseman. Then they draft Seth Jones, and that plan kind of gets blown up to some degree. So, he's kind of in no man's land, and he's a guy who I think they kind of, even though he put up some big numbers in junior, I think that they should have probably dealt him when his value was a little bit higher, because now they're kind of stuck with him, and they have a lot of young defensemen who are very similar because of that.
Seems like though that those guys are always valuable to me. Like that there's always if you want to move him, you can at any point. Well, Seth Jones is another one though I want to talk to you about. I mean, I really loved covering him before he got into the NHL. I loved meeting him last year at the Prospects and everything like that. What was he like to cover? What do you think his upsides are?
Well, he was incredibly accessible, and I think that's something that may change. And I don't think it's a bad thing for Seth Jones. I just think it's simply a maturation process. I mean, he granted every interview he possibly could. He was always very polished and talking about stuff, and I think that Seth Jones has kind of realized I have to take care of myself and being a good hockey player before I can sort of be a good all-around type citizen in terms of being a good NHL player and being a good, being someone who's good with the media and accessible and whatnot. So I think that that's key. And even though it may be frustrating a little bit this upcoming year from a reporting perspective, or could be, I think that it'll very much help him in the long run. In terms of everything else, I mean, he said he's put on some weight this summer, which I guess is pretty much what every young prospect says every summer. Right. And they've all gotten bigger, stronger, and faster. But
I put on some weight this summer too, Josh.
Yeah, I've lost some weight this summer. That's what happens when you plan a wedding. Good grief. But thank you. But the thing with Seth is I think I don't know what to really expect out of him this year, just only because there's so much potential there, but you don't know when it's all going to start clicking because he still has to grow into his body. He still has to kind of figure out some nuances of the game, figure out some tricks, and until we actually see him play, I don't even think in the exhibition season we'll get a real understanding of how much better he is or how good he looks, because he really did look so good last year in the exhibition season and the start of the year when he was playing 25 minutes a game. I think it's really going to be the start of the season when we kind of get a glimpse of where he is from a, I guess, maturity level, because I think the biggest thing with him last year was, you saw him with his pads on. He, of course, looked like an NHL player, and then
Right.
he's, got his pads off, and he looks like he's a 19-year-old kid.
No, he totally does. I agree with you on that, 100%.
And he still, he kind of has a bit of the baby fat still, and still kind of needs to lean up and muscle up. So, there are all sorts of questions as he gets older of, will that happen? I mean, his dad obviously was a pro athlete, but he wasn't known as a guy who kind of looked like he was, an Adonis, if you will. It's like, will Seth kind of still be kind of doughy? Does it matter? I mean, there are all sorts of questions there in terms of his development.
He's a fun player to watch, and obviously, I mean, Nashville fans, are just going to love the guy eventually, if they don't already. I mean, this one thing I've from afar, that market seems to absolutely love star players. Like just from what I've seen, talking to Forsberg, who went down there for a brief period of time, he said it was overwhelming and Korea same way. That when you haven't had that many stars down there, but stars, are I mean, Shea Weber. It's more, and it is obviously a star. Pekka Rinne's a star, but I think they need that offensive star. That really light up the light to really like bring the people, and Neil could be that. That would be a fun thing to watch.
Well, it is funny. You mentioned Seth Jones, and I was at the draft when it happened, and I remember leading up to it, it was all, are they going to get McKinnon, Barkov, or Drouin? And I just remember talking to Seth Jones, and it was on this pier, like on the Hudson River, and it was like 1,000 degrees and humid. And I'm like, yeah, we all know it's probably not going to happen, but if you do fall to Nashville, what do you think about it? And then it actually happened. I just remember all these tweets I was getting from Preds fans were like, oh my God, another defenseman? Are you serious?
Yeah.
And
they're spoiled in Nashville with the defensemen. I mean, no question. That's for sure. All right, so getting on to some other news. A report now that just came out right before this. I guess this was on TSN.ca. Says the National Hockey League will likely command a record expansion fee worth as much as $1.2 billion for a second franchise in Toronto. That's billion with a B. What's better than $1.2 million? $1.2 billion. So, Mike, you've got 1 point, and I know you've got at least $1 billion. You have the 0.2 might be hard to come up with, but what are your thoughts? I mean, I think that this is probably right, and like I've said before many times, this is the Jim Balsillie thing, right? Where this is why the NHL was so against him moving a team to that area, because we were never talking about $1.2 billion relocation fees with Balsillie, and I think if we had been, we might have been a different story there. But
well, the funny thing is that Gary Bettman came out before the weekend and was asked about the expansion talk from that report from Sports Business Journal that was like in late August, and he commented. He didn't deny, that the NHL is interested in expansion, but he balked at the sense of $1.4 billion for 4 franchises. That you're valuing our franchises too low, and it's ironic that he made that statement, and then this report comes out that they're almost expecting that kind of amount for just the Toronto franchise, expansion franchise alone. And that's why if it is Toronto, it will be an expansion franchise, because if it's a transfer, that there's not
the money's not there for that,
Right.
I mean, where people get, not to interrupt you, Mike, for a second, but this is just to think that along those lines of what you're saying, where people I think get the NHL wrong with expansion is the way they look at it isn't like, okay, we're going to get to 4 more teams or 2 more teams. If they have an owner and a building, they're going to go for it. That's the way the NHL works. They're right now in Seattle you have an owner but no building. In Vegas you have like a building but no owner. You have different situations. So I mean, if the NHL gets the right building and the right owner, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, they'll go to 38 teams if they find 6 more billionaires who want to have hockey teams. That's the way to see it.
And Quebec City is in the process of building their building. It's not done yet, but I think it's more than 50% along, so it'll happen.
Yeah.
I mean, being the devil's advocate, you don't have a building in Toronto unless you're going to have the Raptors, an expansion NHL franchise, and the Maple Leafs all playing in the Air Canada Center. And I know it works in LA with the Clippers, the Kings, and the Lakers, but it would be a scheduling nightmare. And the only way that you're going to have a team in Toronto is if you have that second building built. And right now, unless there's some sort of guarantee to the people of Markham to get that arena started again, they're not going to build that building until they know for sure there is going to be a team. So I think there's a lot of pieces yet to be put in place here. I mean, you got to see if MLS&E is on board. I mean, the piece did speculate regarding the separation of Bell and Rogers into two separate ownership groups, one taking the expansion team, one taking the Leafs, and all the ramifications of television broadcasting rights and everything of that nature. But if the league is going to get $1.2 billion expansion fee for a Toronto franchise, a sizable chunk of that better go to MLS&E. Otherwise, I think they're going to try to block, and there's sort of some murkiness there regarding whether a franchise has territorial rights to block a team coming to within their, I think it's 90 miles. I mean, does the NHL want to go to war with MLS&E over an expansion franchise? I don't think so. I mean, I think Bettman will try to grease the wheels, and if he does, then MLS&E will probably get a sizable chunk of that $1.2 billion.
Josh, remember?
Well, one wonders as well. I mean, the NBA, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but the NBA is about to sign a $2 billion deal per year for media rights. And the NHL took the NBC deal for not a lot of money for 10 years. I mean, is this something also that hurts?
It was a lot of money for them. I mean, for the NHL, it was a hell of a deal.
Yeah, it was a lot of money for them, but I mean, $2 billion per year.
Well, it's the NBA,
It's a lot of money.
Oh, yeah, no, that's way more money. Agreed. I'm not debating the fact that $2 billion is way more than $100 million. Yes. I'm not going to argue that point with you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Josh. Continue, though.
Yes, I won. That's all I had.
Okay. Once you win, Josh is out. All right, yes.
I'm keeping quiet now. I won.
I mean, to me, I don't know. What are your thoughts on expansion, Josh and Coops, in places like Vegas and versus Quebec and all these areas?
Well, first and foremost, my wife was thrilled when she saw that a Vegas possibility was popping up. So
yeah,
I think a lot of people around hockey were like, "Oh, wow, that would be great." But
yeah,
I look at the money and I think of, I don't know, I just think of sort of the league and how it progressed in the 90s with all the expansions and the owners kind of getting more and more off expansion fees. And then you sort of had a revolving door from a lot of these expansion teams. I mean, famously here, I know in Nashville, almost moving.
Right.
And then sort of almost a broken business model to some degree. And granted, the lockouts were all a byproduct of other stuff beyond a broken business model. But I'm always very wary of expansion because the expansion fees look awesome to owners on the front end. They say, oh my God, $1.2 billion, and you mentioned, some of it going to MLSE, but, I think the NHL is being more careful about where they expand to, and I kind of like sort of the thought process of, okay, Seattle, I think you have a natural rival there with Vancouver, plus you look at the Seattle Sounders, the soccer team, and how well they've done there.
Yeah.
You think of Las Vegas, that would get a ton of publicity as the first of the major pro North American sports leagues to expand into Las Vegas. Toronto, I've always wondered why that market does not have another team. And for example, the New York metro area has 3 teams, which obviously is a byproduct of what happened many years ago with arenas being available and it being the New York area. I mean, you think of all the other major pro sports, the NHL, I think, is the only league to have 3 teams in the New York metro area. I mean, every other sport has 2 teams. So, but beyond that, I just feel like you have to be careful when it comes to expansion if you're a league like this. I mean, remember, it's had 2 lockouts since 04-05, one of which wiped out an entire season. You're really trying to rebound off a lot of stuff, and now all of a sudden you're talking about changing the business model again. I mean, that's an awful lot of change very, very quickly for a league that seems to always be kind of doing things on the fly.
It is true, and every time you get a new owner, you get a new owner who's on the board of governors. You get a new issue that and then when you get to the next lockout, that balance gets messed up as well. Yeah, there's a lot to it. I agree.
like how you're fatalistic with when you get to the next lockout, not if you get to the next lockout.
Oh no, we have a countdown timer in the other room. Yeah, no, it's we're getting to the next lockout.
Well, I agree with, and I know that John Shannon from Sportsnet mentioned this a couple weeks ago, and I wholeheartedly agree with his assessment that the league is not going to expand by 4 teams. It makes too much sense to expand by 2 to 32 teams and have 2 of those markets that were mentioned in that report as possibilities of teams that are not successful right now going to a place like Vegas or a place like Seattle. I mean, we know that the Islanders just got sold, and right now everything is assumed that new ownership group is going to be stable. We know Vincent Viola bought the Florida Panthers, and right now the assumption is that they're going to be stable. But those organizations haven't been stable for most of their histories. I mean, at least the Islanders in the last decade has been an example of just complete instability. So I think that the league is going to leave open some of these places to have other places to go if these franchises falter.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to owners, though. It really comes down to owners. Who's where? And 32 does make a lot of sense, obviously, but then you've already got more teams in the East, so there's that issue. I think I'm a big fan of the realigning of the NHL to put the northeastern teams into a division, the central teams into a division, and having the North and the Central be the Eastern Conference, and having the West and the South be 2 different divisions. I would like that a lot more. I think it would be really interesting, and you'd have like a Western Conference, with Tampa, Carolina, Nashville, Dallas, Phoenix, LA, that kind of stuff. But
they're gonna have to do something like that. Otherwise, like I said, one thing that I had heard just sort of rumored about regarding a Toronto franchise is that if there is a Toronto expansion franchise, that the Leafs are going to ask the NHL that team be put in the Western Conference. Because then, it's not without precedence. The Maple Leafs were in the Western Conference for most of the 90s. So, it's and they'll be able to afford the travel budget, where some teams some teams don't want to go out west all the time. So I'm just saying that is a possibility.
Oh, it definitely is. It definitely is, and I think that's what they have to do. Another thing here on the docket I wanted to discuss is Devan Dubnyk's new mask, because this is, Devan Dubnyk is he's definitely one of the best looking goalies in the NHL as far as his equipment goes. So I was expecting something great here. Now that he is a Coyote, and it's not too bad. So check this out. I got a picture up. I'll throw this picture up here. Here we go. So here would be Devan Dubnyk's mask. I'm assuming that's his child. On the back of the nest there. But besides that, you've got the Roadrunner in there, which I like. A little bit of a throwback to the desert.
Some cacti.
Yes, indeed. Dubnyk, he played on like 16 of the 30 NHL franchises last year, so he's got a lot of time.
That's what I was going to say. I hope he didn't spend a lot of money on the mask.
Yeah, right.
He was in Nashville for a minute last year. That was fun.
Yeah, he was there for he never played.
2 games.
He did play?
2 games.
I think about 8 goals in 2 games or something like that.
9 goals. Very close.
9. 9, that's right. I knew it was really high, whatever it was.
That's so
Come on, your inaccuracy is terrible.
9 goals in 124 minutes.
I mean, to me, this thing is like with the Dubnyk, my memories of him with the Edmonton Oilers were always that the Oilers would come out and, I would watch the beginning of West Coast games, and the Oilers would come out always killing people. They would come out, they would look like they were amazing. They would score 2 goals in the first 5 minutes of the game. I'd go to sleep thinking the Oilers won that game, and wake up the next morning they would have lost 6-3. So it's like the Dubnyk era in Edmonton. But yeah,
it was the fact that team had no defense as well. So I'm not going to put all the blame on Devan Dubnyk.
Well, no, for sure. I mean,
after watching him in Nashville for 2 games, and was it again 121 or?
124 minutes.
And after being his beat writer for 124 minutes, I could say that it may have been a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B.
There you go.
I'm still surprised the Canadians actually didn't bring him up during the playoffs.
Yeah. Instead
That
of
tells you something right there, because the Canadians were in such dire straits. I mean,
Yeah.
they should have been bringing him in.
He was such damaged goods at that point. Oh God, it was his psyche in Nashville. He was just, it was terrible. I mean, he was just like sitting at his locker, just staring off into space.
Must not have had any confidence last year, that's for sure.
Well, we'll go to the desert now, and that'll fix him. Always fix everything.
Although right now in Arizona, the desert is there's a bunch of flash floods in Arizona, so that mask may not be completely accurate.
He might be able to hang out with Sam Gagner, and they could boost each other's egos.
That's true. It all works so well.
Traded twice in one day. That was quite interesting.
Yeah, Sam Gagner. So now Darcy Kemper.
Yeah.
Who always to me sounds like a soap opera star's name, not a hockey goalie. But Darcy Kemper, from the Minnesota Wild, is, according to TSN's Bob McKenzie, exploring offers in the KHL. Because he basically has been offered a two-way deal by the Minnesota Wild, who have, two goalies under contract, that neither of which they seem to like. And Darcy Kemper's the guy they seem to like, but they're only giving him a two-way deal. I mean, they obviously love Josh Harding, but they're worried about him, which is rightfully so. Even though I've gone on record and saying I think if Harding is healthy, the Wild is a really dangerous team. But I think that's one thing. But yeah, so Kemper going to the KHL. I never buy into these KHL things. I don't know. Me,
this follows in the Torrey Krug rumors to the KHL. Do we really believe either one of them? No, but I think that Kemper was their goaltender for most of the last month of the season and into the playoffs until I believe he got hurt, and then Brizgalov had to replace him. Remember
the memory of Kemper though, right? He did get hurt, but remember the memory of him like trying his hardest, just desperately trying to stay in goal because he knew, and because partially because he wanted to stay in the NHL and partially because Ilya Brizgalov was going to go in goal next.
Yeah.
He was just like doing everything he could to stay out there.
Yeah, that was his opportunity, and the thing is, it's like I understand what Chuck Fletcher is trying to do here, but you got the situation right now, the landscape of where the Wild is right now is you've got two goaltenders who you don't know whether they're going to be there in a month or not because Backstrom has continually gotten hurt. He's been hurt the last 2 seasons. Harding, for the quality that he is, he's a great goaltender when he's healthy, but this the situation and this tragic situation with the MS, he is not dependable. If he could get through the season, if he could consistently play, you're right, Ak. They would be
the best goalie in the NHL for the first couple.
One of the best goalies in the NHL, the way he played last year. But I just don't know whether it's the expectation is there for him to be able to play, say, 50 games and play all the playoffs.
See, I think the problem here is Backstrom. I think they really just the Wild needed to cut their losses with Backstrom a while back, and I don't know why they haven't. I know they're not. I've talked to people in Minnesota a lot, and they've said that that they're just even last 2 years ago now. Go back, I read a story about the Wild before, not last season, but before the season before last season, about how I thought the Wild was going to be. I felt this right after the Kings won the Stanley Cup, and I really felt when I looked at the Wild that they had the same kind of makings to be that kind of a team, and they've got the same kind of talent. And I went to talk to them, and they told me about all the players that we've seen up now, all the good young players that are now part of the team. And Backstrom wasn't even mentioned in the conversation. And I kept saying, well, what about Backstrom? Oh yeah, well, he's here, of course. Yeah, he signed. We got him. But Harding's, he's in Kemper. These are great. So just the fact that they haven't been able to figure out the Backstrom thing till now is really. Kemper should be the backup. He's a good backup, and he's actually a pretty good guy. I think Kemper's actually a potential starting goalie, and Harding should be there. And this Brizgalov, and I don't know, this other world is Brizgalov. Whenever you have Ilya Brizgalov in goal for yourself, and you're going into the conference finals, you have to ask yourself what the hell is going on with our team, right? Because that was just a not so situation. You've had some fun times talking about the KHL in your career, Coops. You must have your secret sources over there by now. What are your thoughts on this whole situation?
Oh, you're bringing me. Well, you know what's funny? You talk about that, and oh man, I was on a West Coast road trip when Alexander Radulov was coming back, and I was so thrilled to be in Los Angeles and San Jose, and so annoyed that I had to be up all hours of the night monitoring that. But in terms of your KHL questions and Darcy Kemper, I agree. I like Darcy Kemper a lot, and obviously Minnesota has some financial situations going on there where they want to offer him a two-way. I mean, to me, he's a starting goaltender in the NHL. I think he's a very solid player, and I also agree that, and this is sort of the danger of giving goalies longer deals is, then you're stuck with a player who you can't really do much with, and a guy like Nicholas Backstrom. I don't think Josh Harding's the issue there at all. Obviously, the tragic situation with him with the MS, but I think that they understand that, and they can kind of sort of go forward with a plan there. I think the bigger issue is more Backstrom and what he can and can't offer that team anymore, and I guess the situation with his contract and the years and the money. It's just, then you have a good young player like Darcy Kemper, and you just almost have no spot for him. And he's a guy who probably is more productive and would be a heck of a lot cheaper than Nicholas Backstrom. So, in terms of the KHL threat, that's just got to be marketing or his agent just throwing some stuff out there. I just don't see Darcy Kemper going to the KHL, but it is an option for guys out there now. But I think the paradigm there has shifted to some degree only because of a lot of the negative publicity the league's gotten over the last few years, and I don't see it as being a great landing destination for some people like it used to be.
No, I agree. Right. I mean, and it's obviously, Radulov aside, who seems to be okay over there. It's that's a whole other story for another day, Coops. But we'll definitely go through that one at some point with you.
I'll write my book on it.
You have to. I mean, that was such a crazy. Oh man, so many. I know we could get together and write a good one on it. I've got some good stories about that one too. So yes, finally, Marty Brodeur in the news. Basically, starting to sound like there's people out there who are predicting that he might not do the Roger Clemens thing, and which is hang out the whole year and play later when some goalie goes down, and might instead actually retire and take a front office job with the Devils. I still don't. I don't think this is happening. I think Marty Brodeur is going to wait. That's just my opinion from talking to people, but it could be wrong. Mike, your thoughts on Marty?
Well, I mean, right now there just doesn't seem to be an opening. I don't think he's a Hall of Fame goaltender, obviously, and he has standards for himself. So I don't think he's going to go someplace and be a number two. I think he wants to go someplace and be an option, be a 1A or a 1B, and play games. And if all the opportunities out there are just backup goaltending situations, like the Montreal Canadiens came up as a rumor, which doesn't make any sense because they have Brodeur, they have Tokarski, so why do they need Marty Brodeur?
I feel great faith in Brodeur, Mike.
Well, no, I'm just saying.
Last year they didn't even go to him in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Well, yeah, but which I still don't agree with because I think he's still a quality NHL backup goaltender. But their mindset was this is in a backup situation where he's coming in for one game. We want to put a starter in there, and Tokarski was starting with their AHL team, so that's why they did what they did. But I mean, and Chicago has been a rumor because Antti Ranta, their backup goaltender, doesn't have a lot of experience, and that team is going to be in the mix for possibly another Stanley Cup run. But I don't think if he goes to Chicago, he's going to take games away from Corey Crawford. There is not an opportunity out there right now for Marty Brodeur to start a significant amount of games. So if that doesn't change by, I would say, the middle of November, he's going to retire.
Well, middle of November. Okay, I'll give you that. But I mean, this is like, for example, Nashville last year. This would have been the perfect situation. I mean, he goes down. I still believe he's going to end the year with the Flyers or the Rangers because either Mason or Lundqvist is going to go down, and that's the way Marty Brodeur should end his career, playing for one of those two teams against the Devils in the playoff series. But
not wishing any ill on.
No, never wishing any ill. But I just think that when you look into the crystal ball, it just feels right that Marty Brodeur has been signed by the Flyers because Mason's out for the season, and they're not going to play Ray Emery more than 4 games. So yeah, I mean that's the. I mean last year, Josh, this would have been fun to bring him into Nashville.
Yeah, it would have been interesting, but I don't know what he has to offer anymore. I mean, granted he was in the East last year. I didn't see him as much as you guys did, but I don't know how much, even as a backup. I mean, from a cost perspective, I mean, how much is he asking for versus how much you could pay a guy like him, what the Preds did last year and putting Carter Hutton on a 2-way. I mean, yeah. I feel like it's not really worth it unless you're going to put him in as a starting guy. Like, for example, if a Mason or a Lundqvist gets hurt, as we've been kind of voodooing over here, and he finishes his career playing with the Rangers and the Flyers. I mean, that's the only option I could see him being. I can't see him going into a backup role.
Yeah, no, I don't think he will either, and I don't think I don't think money's going to be an issue at all. I think he'll go to the right situation. If a team says our goalie's out, and the Flyers have no money, the Rangers have no money on the cap, they'll make money. He'll play there. He just wants to play. He's a competitor, and he's a big personality in the locker room, which I think scares people off. I think that's what scared the Wild off last year when they went for Brizgalov over him. And Halak, who's another big personality in the locker room, and that's another reason that the situation happened. So. At the time, that's what I was told, that they were afraid of, the Wild was afraid to bring Halak in because he would want to start next year, for sure. And they, instead you bring Brizgalov in, which to me is sort of backwards thinking, but that's okay, because next year is next year. But yeah, I mean that's really all the time we have. Josh, Coops is wonderful. Brim's got something for us.
I just wanted to point out Ryan Malone held a press conference within the last hour in New York, and we were talking about how he was skating with the Rangers, and his agent was no contract yet. But wanted to point out Ryan Malone apologized to the Tampa Bay Lightning and owner Jeff Vinik. He said the incidents changed his life for the better. And obviously he made a mistake, and he's thankful that no one got hurt.
People would say that there would be a lot of people who would be cynical about that kind of thing, but I'll tell you, Ryan Malone is not. I totally buy it with Ryan Malone.
Yeah,
he's like a really class guy, really popular guy, and I could see him actually, if that is indeed how he feels, probably he could be an impactful player. I could see him actually getting life out of this.
Buy low, right?
Yeah, I'm telling you, if I was I know the Flyers had thought about bringing in Dustin Penner and Ryan Malone, and they denied that they're going to do either. But like Bill Meltzer on our website pointed out very well, they denied they were going to bring in Bill Guerin the night before, and and they claimed they were going to bring in Dan Cleary last year, and they didn't. So they don't. You never know. Things change.
That's Homer, though. You can't ever go by Homer's word.
Well, it's Hexy now, but it's still the Flyers. It's still the Flyers. The Flyers are the Flyers are. That's how I will end the show. Anyway, all right.
Okay. You win.
Great having you, Coops.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. It's been fun.
Awesome. And people can find you you're at Josh Cooper on.
Joshua Cooper at Joshua Cooper.
At Joshua Cooper on Twitter, and you will be sure covering the Predators in some way, shape, or form.
Fashion.
Yes. Very soon.
All will be revealed soon.
Yeah, stay tuned. There's lots of that going on right now throughout the league. Lots of to be revealed soon spots. All right, guys. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. See you then.